All right, let's talk about something huge, science and faith. You often hear about them being in conflict, right? Like two boxers in a ring. But what if that whole idea is based on a giant misunderstanding? What if they're not even in the same sport, let alone the same ring? It turns out they're asking completely different questions. And we can understand it all by starting with something incredibly simple.
So here's our roadmap. We're going to start with a simple falling stone that's going to make us really question what a scientific law even is. From there, we'll see exactly where science hits a wall, a limit to what it can explain. And we'll wrap it all up with a really cool analogy from a video game that makes it all click into place. Okay, let's jump right in. Section 1, a stone's two stories. How do we explain something as basic as a stone falling? The answers tell us pretty much everything we need to know. So, why does a stone fall? I know, it sounds like a question a 5-year-old would ask, but the way we can answer it reveals two radically different ways of seeing the world. And you might be surprised by how similar they look on the surface.
On one side, you have the scientific view. The stone follows Newton's law of universal gravitation. On the other side, the faith-based view. The stone falls because it's God's will. Now look closely. At their core, they're both doing the exact same thing. They're explaining an event by pointing to a deeper, invisible order.
But this is where the two paths just completely split. Science is all about the how. It's about the mechanism. Can we test it? Can we measure it? Can we use it to predict exactly how fast that stone will be falling in 2 seconds? Faith, on the other hand, is focused on the ultimate why, or who. It's about purpose, about will, and you can't put purpose in a test tube. One is about describing a process, the other is about explaining its ultimate source. And that brings us to a really important word that we use all the time, law. When we talk about a scientific law, what are we really saying? Is the universe actually following orders from some cosmic rulebook? This right here, this is one of the most crucial ideas to get. A stone doesn't fall to obey a law. The law is just our description of what we see the stone do. A law of physics isn't a command that the universe has to follow. It's a model, a description that we, as humans, created to make sense of a pattern we see over and over again. So a scientific law is really just a mathematical function that happens to perfectly fit our observations. You can think of it like an incredibly accurate map of a landscape. But no matter how good that map gets, it's never the landscape itself. It's just our representation of it. And this is exactly why science works so well. For centuries, Newton's laws were a fantastic map of our solar system. But then we spotted an anomaly, a tiny wobble in Mercury's orbit that the map couldn't explain. Now, our response wasn't to say Mercury was disobeying the law. It was to say, hey, our map is incomplete. So along came Einstein with a better map, general relativity, that explained everything Newton's did, plus the wobble. That's falsifiability, and it's the engine that drives science forward. Okay, so if science is just about describing patterns, not commanding them, that actually reveals a deep, fundamental limit to what science can ever tell us about reality. And this is where things get a little weird. The philosopher David Hume made this brilliant point. He said we never actually see cause and effect. We only see one thing happen, and then another thing happen. He called it a constant conjunction. A cue ball hits an 8-ball, and then the 8-ball moves. We see the sequence, but we never actually see the force or the causation that connects them. We just assume it's there because it happens every single time. And what's amazing is that centuries before Hume, the theologian Gazzali made the exact same argument from a totally different angle. He said when fire touches cotton, the fire isn't the cause. God is the one directly creating the event of burning at that precise moment. For him, the fire and the burning are just two events that God consistently joins together. It's the same idea of a constant conjunction. Now, really think about this for a second. Can science ever prove Al-Ghazali wrong? The answer is a hard no. A formula like F equals ma is a perfect description of the pattern of what happens, but it has absolutely nothing to say about the ultimate cause of that pattern. It can't tell the difference between some inherent property of matter we call gravity and a divine will that just so happens to make everything act in a way that perfectly matches our formula. Science is totally stuck at the level of description. And that realization is the key to everything. It shows us that science and faith aren't at war. They're not even on the same playing field. They live in two completely separate worlds, asking totally different kinds of questions. The first world is epistemology. It's a fancy name for the theory of knowledge. It just asks, how do we know things? Its tools are what you'd expect: observation, measurement, experiments, data. This is 100% the domain of science. The second world is ontology. This is the theory of being. It asks the really big why questions. Why is there a universe at all? What's the point of any of it? These are questions about ultimate causes, and you can't design an experiment to answer them. This is the domain of faith and philosophy. This is why the whole God of the gaps idea doesn't really work. As science explains more of the how, the space for faith doesn't get smaller. When we figured out the physics of lightning, we didn't get rid of the need for an ontological why. We just stopped blaming Zeus. The deeper question, why does a universe that even has things like electricity exist in the first place? That question is still there. Science doesn't erase the why, it just helps us draw a clearer line between the two worlds. Now, to make this separation between the how and the why totally concrete, let's use a modern analogy. I think this will really make it click. Imagine there's a super smart AI character living inside the game Minecraft, and this AI is a brilliant scientist. It observes its blocky world, it runs experiments, and eventually it figures out all the physical laws of its universe, the code that makes sand fall, water flow, and redstone circuits work. Now, here's the big question. Can that AI, using only its in-game science, ever discover the programmer who wrote the code? Can it run an experiment to find out about the programming language, or the computer its world is running on, or the person sitting at the keyboard?
The answer is no way. It's totally impossible. Its scientific method is trapped inside the physics of the game. It can't study something that exists in a reality outside its own. The only way that AI could ever know about the programmer is if the programmer decided to reveal themselves, like by sending a message into the game's chat window.
And that Minecraft analogy brings us right to our final, and I think really profound conclusion about why science can't ever find God. Science, by its very nature, is the study of the rules inside our universe, inside the game. So it can never prove or disprove a creator who exists outside the game. Now, could God enter the game and become observable? Sure, but at that exact moment, God would stop being an object of faith and would become a scientific fact, just another piece of the physics of our world to be studied. And that leaves us with one last, big question to think about. If the programmer stepped into the game, if God became a verifiable scientific fact that we could prove in a lab, would faith, that choice we make to believe in something we can't prove, would it even have any meaning anymore? Or would we just find ourselves asking a whole new set of even deeper questions? Thanks for watching.